December 9, 1965. America was deep in the heart of the Cold War, a nation looking nervously towards the heavens, not just for Soviet missiles, but also caught up in the first great wave of the space age and the burgeoning mystery of unidentified flying objects. Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official UFO investigation, was still active, publicly dismissing most sightings, but secretly grappling with a persistent core of unexplained cases. It was against this backdrop of technological awe and Cold War paranoia that something extraordinary happened in the skies over North America, an event that would culminate in a small wooded ravine outside the sleepy town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions, alleged government cover-ups, and a mystery that endures to this day. It began in the late afternoon as the winter sun dipped towards the horizon. Reports started flooding in from thousands of eyewitnesses across a vast swath of the continent, from Canada down through Michigan, Ohio, and into Pennsylvania. People reported seeing a brilliant, fiery object streaking across the sky. It was described as a ball of fire, trailing smoke or debris, moving slower than a typical meteor, and appearing to follow a controlled, almost flat trajectory, rather than the steep arc of a natural object re-entering the atmosphere. Pilots in the air reported seeing it. People on the ground pulled their cars over to watch it pass. Initial assumptions pointed towards a meteor, perhaps a spectacular fireball from the ongoing Geminid meteor shower. Newsrooms buzzed with calls. But as the object continued its journey southeastward over Pennsylvania, something changed. Witnesses on the ground reported hearing sonic booms, and then, crucially, multiple independent observers claimed they saw the object make a turn, seemingly changing its course, banking as if under intelligent control. It was no longer behaving like a simple rock falling from space. The focus of this strange aerial drama then narrowed dramatically onto the rural wooded landscape surrounding the small coal mining village of Kecksburg, nestled in Westmoreland County, about 30 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Local residents heard the sonic booms. Many saw the fiery object descend, now appearing much closer, much larger, and moving much slower. Some described seeing flaming debris falling from it as it passed overhead. And then, several key witnesses saw it make its final dramatic maneuver. It appeared to slow down further, almost hovering, before making a controlled turn and descending into a wooded ravine just outside the village limits. A young boy playing outside claimed to have seen it actually land, not just crash. Others reported seeing a bluish smoke rising from the woods and hearing a thudding or crashing sound. The consensus among those closest to the event was immediate and certain. Something tangible, something manufactured, had come down in those woods. The first on the scene were local volunteer firefighters, responding to multiple reports of a possible plane crash or a brush fire in the woods. Among them was a man named James Romansky, whose testimony would become central to the Kecksburg legend. As the firefighters pushed through the trees and underbrush towards the reported impact site, they were met not with the expected wreckage of an aircraft, but with something utterly baffling. There, partially embedded in the soft earth of the ravine, was a large metallic object. Witnesses consistently described it as being acorn or bell-shaped, perhaps 10 to 12 feet long and 6 to 8 feet in diameter at its base. It appeared to be made of a seamless bronze or copper-colored metal with no visible rivets, joints, or seams. Most intriguingly, many witnesses reported seeing strange markings around the base of the object, symbols that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphics or some form of unknown geometric writing. The object itself was reportedly warm to the touch and emitted a faint, pulsating blue light. There was a smell in the air, sometimes described as being like ozone or burning electrical wiring. The scene was one of chaos and confusion. More local residents began to converge on the area, drawn by the news spreading through the small town. The firefighters, unsure of what they were dealing with, attempted to secure the scene. But they were not alone for long. Within an astonishingly short period of time, even before the local fire chief had fully assessed the situation, another group arrived, the Pennsylvania State Police. They immediately took charge, ordering civilians and even some of the firefighters away from the object. But the state police were just the first wave. Soon after, arriving with remarkable speed and efficiency for such a remote rural location, came the United States military. Uniformed personnel, reportedly from the nearby Lockbourne Air Force Base in Ohio, later renamed Rickenbacker AFB, began to arrive in force. They were not there to assist. They were there to take over. The speed and scale of the military response was in itself one of determinants that something far beyond a simple meteor or plane crash was unfolding in Kecksburg that night. How could the military mobilize and arrive so quickly at a specific remote location based only on scattered initial reports? It suggested prior knowledge or a tracking capability far beyond what was publicly known at the time. The arrival of the army marked a dramatic shift in the atmosphere. The initial excitement and curiosity of the local residents quickly turned to unease and intimidation. The secret was about to be sealed. The arrival of the United States military into the small isolated ravine near Kecksburg on the night of December 9, 1965, was swift, efficient, and undeniably intimidating. What had begun as a chaotic local event, managed by curious volunteer firefighters and a few state troopers, instantly transformed into a high-security military operation. Uniformed soldiers, their numbers seemingly increasing by the minute, established a hard perimeter around the wooded area. They were professional, silent, and not there to answer questions. Civilians, including local reporters who had rushed to the scene hoping to cover what they thought was a plane crash, were brusquely ordered back. Even the volunteer firefighters, the very first responders who had witnessed the object up close, were pushed away. An invisible yet impenetrable line had been drawn. Whatever had come down in that ravine was now the property of the United States government, and the public was not welcome. As the cold December night deepened, the military operations swung into full gear. Witnesses who managed to remain at the edges of the perimeter described a scene of intense activity. Powerful floodlights were brought in, cutting through the darkness of the ravine. Heavy equipment began to arrive, including cranes and large military flatbed trucks. It became clear that this was not a simple search or investigation. It was a recovery operation. The military was not there to study the object where it lay. They were there to take it away. The speed with which these specialized resources were mobilized to such a remote, rural location only deepened the mystery. How did they know exactly what to bring and where to go on such short notice? It strongly suggested that the object had been tracked on its descent, perhaps by military radar, and that a pre-designated recovery team was already on standby to deal with just such incidents. Several key eyewitnesses, including firefighter James Romansky and other locals who managed to sneak close to the perimeter, described seeing military personnel in full protective suits, resembling hazmat or radiation gear, operating near the acorn-shaped object. These suits reinforced the idea that the object was not an ordinary meteorite or a piece of known satellite debris. There was a clear concern about some kind of contamination or unknown hazard emanating from the object. The suited men were seen taking readings with instruments, closely examining the strange hieroglyphic-like symbols at the object's base and eventually preparing it for transport. The recovery process itself was shrouded in secrecy, occurring late at night, away from the prying eyes of most townspeople. But the most consistent account that emerged was that the object was carefully lifted from the ravine by a military crane and placed onto a large flatbed truck. The truck was then covered with a tarp, and a heavily armed military convoy escorted it out of the area, disappearing into the night towards an unknown destination. While the covert recovery operation was underway, a very public operation of disinformation had already begun. The following morning, the Army issued an official statement to the press. The statement was succinct and dismissive. They claimed that a thorough search of the area had been conducted and that nothing had been found. The official explanation for the fireball seen by thousands across 6 states and Canada? It was simply a meteor. The Army insisted that the object had either burned up completely in the atmosphere or had landed somewhere else, perhaps in Canada or Lake Erie. For the residents of Kecksburg, who had seen the object in the ravine with their own eyes, who had touched its warm metallic surface and watched the military haul it away on a truck, this official statement was not just wrong. It was a blatant insult to their intelligence. It was a bald-faced lie. This official lie was reinforced by a campaign of subtle yet effective intimidation. In the days and weeks following the incident, key witnesses reported being visited by men in uniform, or sometimes by men in suits identifying themselves as government officials. These were not friendly visits. The witnesses were instructed, in no uncertain terms, not to talk about what they had seen. They were told they were mistaken, that they had seen only a meteor, and that spreading stories about spaceships would only cause unnecessary panic. Some witnesses reported more veiled threats, hinting that their lives or jobs could be at risk if they persisted in telling their stories. The effect was immediate and lasting. Many of the most crucial eyewitnesses, frightened and confused, simply stopped talking. The wall of silence began to form. The story of what really happened in Kecksburg that night started to fade into obscurity, becoming just another unconfirmed local legend rather than an investigated incident. However, the official meteor explanation never quite fit the facts. Astronomers and experts quickly pointed out that the object's reported trajectory, its slow movement, its ability to make turns, and its controlled descent was completely inconsistent with that of a natural meteoroid. Furthermore, no significant impact crater was ever found, and no meteorite fragments were recovered by independent sources. The official explanation seemed scientifically untenable. This led to a second wave of alternative official explanations floated over the years. One theory suggested it might have been a secret Soviet satellite, perhaps one containing nuclear material that had deorbited and crashed. Another suggested it could have been a piece of a secret American space program, perhaps an experimental capsule or drone. The Air Force, for example, would later admit that they had lost a secret test device called a GE Mark II re-entry vehicle over the area around that time, but insisted it had disintegrated and did not match the description of the Kecksburg object. Each new explanation seemed only to muddy the waters further, never fully addressing the eyewitness descriptions of the acorn-shaped object and the strange hieroglyphs. Whatever fell in Kecksburg remained stubbornly unidentified. For decades the story remained that way, an intriguing local mystery full of conflicting testimony and unsatisfying official explanations. Then, in the early 2000s, a renewed effort by civilian investigators, armed with the Freedom of Information Act and a surprising new ally, would begin to pry the case open again, uncovering evidence that suggested the lie ran even deeper than anyone had imagined. For nearly 40 years, the Kecksburg incident remained frozen in time, a local legend whispered about in the small Pennsylvania town, but largely dismissed by the wider world. The official explanation, a meteor, stood firm despite its scientific inconsistencies. The eyewitnesses, intimidated or resigned, mostly kept their silence. The physical object, whatever it was, had vanished into the black hole of military secrecy. It seemed destined to become just another unsolved footnote in the annals of UFO history. But the mystery refused to die completely. It was kept alive by a handful of dedicated civilian researchers, most notably Stan Gordon, a local investigator who had been documenting UFO sightings and strange phenomena in the Pennsylvania area since the 1960s. Gordon meticulously collected first-hand accounts from Kecksburg witnesses, preserving their stories even as the official narrative tried to erase them. His work, along with others, ensured that the memory of the event and the deep sense of injustice felt by the community did not fade away. The turning point came in the early 2000s, fueled by a new era of public interest in government transparency and the powerful tool of the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. A Washington, D.C.-based advocacy group, the Coalition for Freedom of Information, led by investigative journalist Leslie Kean, decided to take on the Kecksburg case. They believed that the government's decades-long silence and contradictory explanations were unacceptable. They partnered with Stan Gordon and launched a major new investigation, aiming not just to collect eyewitness testimony, but to force the government itself to finally reveal what it knew. Their primary target was not the military, who had already proven adept at stonewalling, but a different agency, one whose name had unexpectedly surfaced in connection with the Kecksburg files, NASA. In 2002, Kean filed a FOIA lawsuit against NASA, demanding access to any and all documents related to the Kecksburg incident. Why NASA? The connection was based on tantalizing clues found buried in old Air Force files released under previous FOIA requests. These files contained internal memos from the 1960s discussing the analysis of recovered debris from unidentified flying objects. One specific memo related to Project Blue Book mentioned that debris recovered from the Kecksburg incident had been shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for analysis, and that personnel from NASA had been involved in examining it. This was a potential bombshell. If NASA, the nation's civilian space agency, had been involved in analyzing debris from a supposed meteor, it suggested the object was potentially of technological, perhaps even aerospace, origin. The lawsuit aimed to pry open NASA's archives and find out exactly what their scientists had discovered. NASA's initial response to the lawsuit was dismissive. They claimed they had searched their archives and found no relevant documents pertaining to Kecksburg. But Leslie Kean and her legal team refused to accept this. They argued that NASA's search had been inadequate, and they presented the court with the existing Air Force documents that explicitly mentioned NASA's involvement. The legal battle dragged on for years. NASA continued to stonewall, providing evasive answers and claiming that any relevant files had likely been lost or destroyed over the decades. The agency seemed determined to keep its Kecksburg secrets buried, but the pressure was mounting. The lawsuit was gaining media attention, spearheaded by a major investigative report on the Sci-Fi Channel, now Sci-Fi. Key witnesses, feeling emboldened by the renewed interest, began to come forward again, some speaking publicly for the first time in decades, reaffirming their accounts of the acorn-shaped object and the military recovery. Then, in 2005, something extraordinary happened. Facing increasing legal pressure and potential court sanctions for their inadequate searches, NASA appeared to partially buckle. The agency's chief spokesman for the Science Mission Directorate, David Stites, issued a startling public statement. He admitted that NASA had, in fact, examined debris recovered from the Kecksburg incident back in the 1960s. He stated that experts from the agency had analyzed fragments and determined they were likely from a Russian satellite. However, he claimed that the relevant documentation supporting this conclusion had been misplaced sometime in the 1990s. This statement was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was the first official admission from any government agency that something tangible had actually been recovered from Kecksburg, directly contradicting the original Army statement that nothing was found. It also confirmed NASA's involvement. But on the other hand, the claim that the object was a Russian satellite felt like just another convenient, unverifiable explanation, especially coupled with the immediate assertion that all the supporting evidence had conveniently gone missing. Leslie Kean and her team saw this not as a resolution, but as a confirmation of a cover-up. If NASA knew it was a Russian satellite, why hadn't they said so in 1965? Why the decades of denial? And where were the files? The lawsuit pressed on, demanding the release of the lost documents. In 2007, NASA produced a new set of documents, claiming they were the relevant files. But upon review, Kean and her experts found them to be completely unrelated, mostly dealing with general satellite tracking and orbital debris from different time periods, with no specific mention of Kecksburg or the analysis of any unique object. The judge overseeing the case agreed, expressing frustration with NASA's continued obstruction and ordering them to conduct a more thorough search. This led to the final, and perhaps most revealing chapter of the legal battle. In 2009, after years of searching and claiming nothing could be found, NASA suddenly discovered several boxes of previously missing files from the relevant time period. However, the agency informed the court that these files were still undergoing a lengthy declassification review process. The implication was clear. The files existed, they were relevant, but they contained information deemed too sensitive for public release, even after more than 40 years. The lawsuit ultimately ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. NASA never released the files they claimed to have found. The court, perhaps weary of the endless battle, eventually closed the case, leaving the central mystery unresolved. But the lawsuit had achieved something crucial. It had forced a major government agency to admit on the record that something was recovered at Kecksburg, that NASA was involved in its analysis, and that relevant files existed but were being withheld. The official story of a simple meteor had been irrevocably shattered. The question was no longer if there was a cover-up, but what exactly were they covering up? Was it merely a secret Soviet satellite, or something far more extraordinary? The final clues might lie not in government files, but in the memories of new witnesses, individuals who had remained silent for decades, waiting for the right moment to finally reveal what they saw happen to the object after it left Kecksburg. The protracted legal battle with NASA, spearheaded by Leslie Kean and the Coalition for Freedom of Information, ended in a frustrating stalemate. While the lawsuit successfully forced the agency to admit its involvement and the existence of relevant files, those files remained stubbornly locked away, protected by the impenetrable wall of government secrecy. The official explanation had shifted from nothing found to a misplaced file about a Russian satellite. But neither story satisfied the witnesses or the researchers who had dedicated years to uncovering the truth. The trail seemed to have gone cold once again, but just as the legal avenues were closing, a new source of information began to emerge, not from dusty government archives, but from the memories of individuals who claimed to have direct first-hand knowledge of what happened to the Kecksburg object after it was whisked away by the military on that cold December night in 1965. These were the new witnesses, people who had remained silent for decades, often bound by security oaths or fear of ridicule, but who were now, late in life, choosing to come forward. One of the most compelling of these new accounts came from a man named Myron Futrell, a retired military veteran. Futrell claimed that in 1965, he was stationed at Lockbourne Air Force Base near Columbus, Ohio, the very base from which the initial military responders to Kecksburg were dispatched. He stated that shortly after the Kecksburg incident, a large tarp-covered object on a flatbed truck arrived at the base under heavy guard late at night. Futrell claimed that he and a few other select personnel were involved in transporting this object into a secure hangar. While he never saw the object completely uncovered, he described its general size and shape under the tarp as being consistent with the acorn or bell shape reported by the Kecksburg witnesses. He recalled a palpable atmosphere of extreme secrecy surrounding the object, his brief stay at Lockbourne, before it was quickly moved on to another, presumably more secure, location. Futrell's testimony provided a crucial link, suggesting the object's initial destination after leaving Pennsylvania. That destination, according to multiple other sources and researchers, was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. Wright-Pat has long been the legendary ground zero of UFO lore in America. It was the headquarters of Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official UFO investigation program. It housed the Foreign Technology Division, FTD, the branch responsible for analyzing captured or crashed enemy aircraft and technology. And most famously, it is the location rumored to house the legendary Hangar 18, the alleged repository of recovered alien spacecraft, including the wreckage from the Roswell crash. The theory that the Kecksburg object was taken to Wright-Patterson for analysis fits perfectly within this established narrative. It was the logical place for the military to take any recovered object of unknown technological origin. And it is from Wright-Patterson that perhaps the most explosive new testimony emerged. This account came in directly through the work of Stan Gordon, who had interviewed a source he claimed was a former high-ranking military officer with direct knowledge of the Kecksburg object's analysis at Wright-Pat. According to this anonymous source, the object was indeed technological and not of Soviet origin. The source allegedly confirmed the acorn shape and the strange hieroglyphic markings. But the most stunning claim was about the object's composition and purpose. The source stated that metallurgical analysis revealed the object was made of an unknown alloy and that its interior contained a complex propulsion or power system unlike anything known to terrestrial science. Furthermore, the source claimed that the hieroglyphic symbols were not merely decorative, but were part of the object's control system, akin to buttons or a user interface. This testimony, if true, elevates the Kecksburg object from a simple piece of space debris to something far more extraordinary, a potentially functional, intelligently controlled craft of unknown, possibly non-human origin. Further corroboration for the Wright-Patterson connection came from another unexpected source. John F. Schuessler, a retired aerospace engineer who had worked for McDonnell Douglas and was later a founding member of the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. Schuessler claimed he had spoken with colleagues who were involved in the analysis of the Kecksburg object at Wright-Patterson. These colleagues allegedly described the object's metallic shell and the strange symbols, confirming details provided by the original Kecksburg witnesses. Adding another layer of intrigue, Schuessler also related stories from his sources about attempts to cut into the object's seamless hull, which supposedly proved extremely difficult, suggesting an incredibly advanced or unusual metallurgy. While these accounts are second-hand, they come from credible sources within the aerospace community, adding weight to the theory that a detailed top-secret analysis of the Kecksburg object did indeed take place at Wright-Patterson. So what does this new testimony, combined with the original eyewitness accounts and the revelations from the NASA lawsuit, tell us? It paints a picture of a consistent, multi-decade cover-up surrounding an object that defied conventional explanation. First, numerous credible witnesses saw a controlled fiery object crash or land near Kecksburg. Second, local firefighters and residents observed a solid, metallic, acorn-shaped object with strange markings at the site. Third, the U.S. military rapidly secured the area, recovered the object under extreme secrecy, and transported it away. Fourth, the government issued a demonstrably false explanation, a meteor, and intimidated witnesses into silence. Fifth, NASA, despite decades of denial, eventually admitted to analyzing debris from the incident, but claimed the files were lost. And sixth, new witnesses have emerged claiming the object was taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where analysis allegedly revealed it to be a technological craft of unknown origin with hieroglyphic-like controls. Was the Kecksburg object an extraterrestrial spacecraft? Was it a secret Soviet weapon? Was it a failed American experimental project, perhaps related to Nazi technology acquired through Operation Paperclip, as some theories suggest? The surviving evidence does not provide a definitive answer, but what the evidence does make overwhelmingly clear is that the official story is a lie. Something real, something tangible, and something deeply mysterious fell out of the sky and landed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1965. The United States government knows what it was. They recovered it, they analyzed it, and they have spent nearly 60 years systematically hiding the truth from their own citizens. The new witnesses may not have solved the ultimate mystery of the object's origin, but they have confirmed the most important part of the story. The recovery was real, and the cover-up continues to this day. The truth about Kecksburg remains hidden, locked away in those still classified files, a silent testament to a secret the government is determined to keep.